A few days back, Sudan's army claimed that they had taken over Khartoum's international airport and they posted a smiling photo of General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan landing from a chopper with a big smile, and Sudan's capital was totally in their control. Troops also recaptured the RSF last stronghold in Khartoum, that is the Taiba al-Hasnab camp. That is what was told by Brigadier General Nabil Abdul Ali on the social media, who was the Sudan Army's spokesperson. There was no comment by the RSF, and Sudan's military later on retook the Republican Palace, the seat of the pre-war government. The RSF had held that palace, the airport and large parts of the capital since the war began in April 2023. So this is a pivotal and decisive moment in the history of Sudan, because if Khartoum is free, Sudan can be free. Military control of the airport along with the calm in Khartoum could allow aid groups to fly more supplies into the country, where fighting has driven some 14 million people from their homes and pushed some areas into famine. At least 28,000 people have been killed, though the number is likely to be far higher. The RSF is still believed to hold scattered positions in Khartoum, but liberating the capital doesn't end the conflict, as the RSF still controls parts of the western Darfur region and other areas. The war erupted when the military and the RSF turned against each other in a struggle for power. Their battles along Khartoum quickly spread across much of the country. For most of the war, Burhan and the government have been based in the Red Sea coastal city of Port Sudan. So this war is entering its third year, and let us hope things start stabilizing after the capture of Khartoum. But before we move forward, I will request you to see the complete video so that you can understand how this civil war has erupted in Sudan, though Sudan is on the brink of poverty with many people starving and Sudan having been in a state of famine. Before we proceed, I will request you all to please help our NGO, Humanitarian Foundation, which has a tagline for right to education for the underprivileged. And also you can purchase something from our e-commerce site Sonajuri Arts, which showcases the art of Bengal. And every purchase of you will help these artisans get a quality of life. Like moving ahead with our video, Sudan is having a civil war, and this war has entered its third year. So what is the background of this civil war? So as the civil war continues, Sudan's two warring factions remain locked in a deadly power struggle. Death toll estimates vary widely, with the former US envoy for Sudan suggesting as many as 150,000 people that have been killed since the conflict began on 15th April 2023. More than 14 million people have been displaced, giving rise to the worst displacement crisis in the world. Nearly 3 million people have been displaced and fled to unstable areas in Chad, Ethiopia, South Sudan, and other refugee camps. The UN continues to plead for more support, as more than 30 million need humanitarian assistance, and deteriorating food security risks are triggering the world's largest human crisis. Hunger is a big crisis, and food is very short, and there is an open request by the UN to please give in more aid to Sudan. So the background of the whole civil war is that in the first half of the 20th century, Sudan was a joint protectorate of Egypt and the United Kingdom, known as the Anglo-Egyptian Condominium. Egypt and the UK signed a treaty relinquishing sovereignty to the independent Republic of Sudan in 1956. The stark internal divide between the country's wealthier northern region, which was majority Arab and Muslim, and its lesser developed southern region, which was majority Christian or animist, sparked two civil wars, the second of which would see the country split into two states in 2011. The Second Sudanese Civil War from 1983 to 2005 killed an estimated 20 million people with widespread documentation of famine and atrocities. In July 2011, Sudan's southern territory succeeded and formed a new state, the Republic of South Sudan. The dictatorship of Omar al-Bashir defined Sudan's post-colonial period. Bashir seized power in a 1989 coup after serving in the Egyptian military during condominium rule and later as an officer in the Sudanese Armed Forces, that is the SAF. As president, he oversaw the Second Sudanese Civil War, the secession of South Sudan, and the conflict in Darfur. The Darfur War, which broke out in 2003, was later condemned by the International Criminal Court as a genocide targeting North Arab populations, including the Fur, Zakhawa, and Masalit people in the Western Sudan. During his regime, Bashir enforced a strict interpretation of Sharia, employed private militia and morality police to enforce his decrees, and persecuted Christianity, Sunni apostasy, Shiism, and other minority religious activities. Bashir's regime survived until 2019. By the final decade of his presidency, Bashir faced increasingly popular protests calling for democracy, access to essential service, and a new system of governance. The revolution culminated in an April 2019 coup which was carried out jointly by the SAF led by General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan and the Rapid Security Force, that is the RSF, a militia led by Mohammed Hamdan Hemedti Dagalo. The RSF is the most popular paramilitary group to emerge from the Bashir era. It evolved from the Janjaweed militia, an Arab majority armed group funded by Bashir to suppress southern Sudanese rebels and fight in the Darfur War. The group committed brutal attacks and crimes across the Darfur region, including mass displacement, sexual violence, and kidnapping. The first 2 years of the conflict in Darfur claimed over 200,000 lives, with over 100,000 more since 2005. With Bashir's support, the loosely coordinated Janjaweed was formally organized under the RSF banner in 2013. Since then, the RSF has been employed as a border guard force, a source of mercenaries for the Saudi coalition in the Yemeni war, and a hired security force to repress popular uprisings. RSF leader Hemedti became one of the Sudan's wealthiest men by seizing control of gold mines. Before 2019, Bashir hired the RSF to protect him from coups and assassination attempts. Despite this, the RSF ultimately joined forces with the SAF in the 2019 coup to oust Bashir and establish a transitional government and a new constitution. Burhan led the Transitional Sovereignty Council with Hemedti as his deputy alongside other military leaders and several civilians. Among the civilian members, the council chose Abdullah Hamdok, an economist and development expert, as prime minister. During his brief tenure, he attempted to mitigate Sudan's extreme economic turmoil and project stability to the outside world. However, the SAF and RSF orchestrated a coup against Hamdok in October 21 and suspended the constitution. In response, international institutions such as the World Bank and the IMF paused badly needed debt relief and other aid to Sudan. Mass demonstration demanding a return to civilian control intensified in Khartoum. Hamdok was briefly reinstated as Prime Minister in November 21 after agreeing to concede certain governing powers to Burhan and Hemedti. However, he ultimately resigned in January 2022 as Sudanese protesters were dissatisfied with the terms of his reinstatement and violent actions of security forces who had repeatedly beaten and killed protesters. Since Hamdok's resignation, Sudan has had no effective civilian leadership with Burhan operating as de facto head of state. By early 2022, Burhan and Hemedti were left at the helm of the government with the power to direct its democratic transition. Negotiations throughout 2022 over the future of Sudanese governance culminated in a December 2022 deal laying the groundwork for a 2-year transition to civilian leadership and national elections. Many citizens rejected the plan due to the contested time frame, the security sector retaining some post-transition state powers, and the failure to hold Burhan, Hemedti, and other security sector figures accountable for violence. Unrest broke out again and persisted from December onto the spring, leading to the most violent crackdown on protesters. Major sticking points emerged as transitional government began to negotiate a plan. Foremost was the role of Hemedti and RSF. The agreement elevated Hemedti to Burhan's equal, promoting him from general's deputy. The deal also called the eventual integration of the RSF into Sudan's legitimate armed forces under civilian leadership. However, the deal did not specify a deadline for the RSF's integration into the SAF due to disagreement between Burhan and Hemedti. The two leaders missed an early 2023 deadline to determine conditions for the agreement's implementation, indicating tension over the RSF-SAF relationship and the future of both the forces as subordinates of an elected government. As the months passed, this past struggle between Burhan's SAF and Hemedti's RSF continued to stall the country's transitional efforts. By April, SAF troops lined the streets of Khartoum and RSF soldiers were deployed throughout Sudan. On April 15, a series of explosions took Khartoum by storm along with heavy gunfire. SAF and RSF leaderships both accused each other of firing first. The involvement of the Wagner Group and the foreign military influence, notably from the United Arab Emirates, has deepened the rivalry at the core of Sudan's crisis. The fighting in Khartoum persisted and incidents of violence across the country continued to rise, including Darfur. The assassination of West Darfur's governor, Khamis Abakar, in June 2023, likely by RSF militants, marked an escalation. Abakar had accused the RSF of renewed genocidal attacks against minorities in Darfur. In June 24, an NGO report stated that over 235 fires had been set in villages across Sudan, with majority set by the militias in Darfur since fighting erupted in mid-April 23. Several NGOs, including Human Rights Watch, asked for aid to come up and help out Sudan because it had split into two states, and also there was a hunger crisis, state of famine, and also the killings had reached millions, which was a state not worth watching but needed to be put back into control, which was going out of its control because of this ongoing civil war. So, humanitarian access remained a crucial concern for many international actors, including the United States, which called for the UN Security Council to authorize aid deliveries through Chad. Conditions in the country were already poor before April 23 and have worsened since, and there have been many deaths and disease outbreaks. So, after the latter part of 2024, the SAF launched a coordinated offensive around the three metropolitan cities of Khartoum, Omdurman, and Bari, catching RSF forces off guard. The SAF seized significant territory in the capital for the first time since RSF took control at the onset of the war. As 2025 began, fighting in Khartoum State intensified, with the SAF retaking key areas around the capital. In January, the SAF drove RSF forces out of Omdurman, recaptured a vital oil refinery just north of Khartoum, and regained near total control of Bari. In February 2025, SAF forces ended the RSF's 2-year siege of Obeid, a strategic city with railway connections to Khartoum. In Western Sudan, the RSF has continued its attack on the local rebel forces, SAF personnel and civilians. Al-Fashar, the capital of North Darfur, remains the center of fighting between the SAF and its allies and the RSF. RSF targeting of non-Arab ethnic groups in Darfur has raised concerns of genocide evidenced by the RSF attack and looting of Al-Fasar's primary hospital. This humanitarian crisis also rose as hospitals, patients and children were killed mercilessly. So, after February 25, the RSF leadership and its allies gathered in Nairobi, Kenya to advance their plan to create a parallel government. They signed a charter outlining key aspects of a post-war government, including secularism, democracy, a decentralized structure, and a unified national army. In early March, the RSF signed a new constitution signaling its intent to garner diplomatic leverage and legitimacy. The same month, the Sudanese government filed a complaint to the International Court of Justice accusing the UAE of complicity in genocide due to its armed support for the RSS. So now, with Khartoum having fallen into arms of the Sudanese army, let us see what unfolds in the future for Sudan, which is, like I said, on the brink of a hunger crisis and famine. So please keep watching my channel for more updates on international relations, and also I am here to teach you more on life skills. You can call me on the number given below so that I can be of help to you. Jai Hind.